You have been lied to about what it takes to win. They told you to put your head down and push through the pain. They said that if you just hit the wall hard enough, eventually it will break. But as you stand there, exhausted and bleeding, the wall remains perfectly intact. The truth nobody tells you is that blind endurance is not a virtue, it is a fast track to self-destruction. We have glorified the image of the man who suffers endlessly without making progress, confusing sheer stubbornness with actual strength. You are not failing because you lack willpower. You are exhausted because you are fighting a battle of attrition against an immovable object. It is time to drop the hammer and look for the door. In this space, we will dismantle the toxic advice of simply never giving up. We are going to replace brute force with strategic adaptability. You will learn the profound difference between abandoning your ultimate vision and simply changing your failed methods. This is about learning to bend so you do not break and mastering the silent power of flexibility to achieve exactly what you want. We live in a society that worships senseless suffering. You are bombarded with messages telling you that pain equals progress and that backing down from a flawed strategy is a sign of weakness. This cult of blind persistence forces you to equate your self-worth with how much punishment you can endure. It creates a modern struggle where you are terrified to change course, convinced that pivoting makes you a failure. The emotional cost of this mindset is devastating. Look around and you will see exhausted men who have tied their entire identity to a sinking ship. When you insist on a path that clearly does not work, you are not proving your strength. You are proving your inefficiency. Your energy drains, your confidence shatters, and the goal you once loved becomes a source of deep, quiet resentment that poisons your daily life. It is time to reframe your approach with absolute clarity. True power is not found in absorbing endless damage, but in having the situational awareness to step off a doomed path. Recognize that persistence is only valuable when applied to the right mechanism. Honor yourself enough to stop wasting your life on broken methods. You must detach your ego from the strategy and keep your eyes locked on the final victory. You build a plan in the safety of your mind. You chart a straight line from where you are to where you want to be. But the moment you step into the real world, the terrain shifts. The modern trap is believing that the map you drew yesterday must dictate your reality today. We cling to our initial blueprints because they offer a false sense of control in a chaotic, unpredictable environment. When the road inevitably blocks, the stubborn man sits in his car, paralyzed, waiting for the obstacle to magically disappear. He wastes months, sometimes years, angry at the world because reality did not respect his perfectly laid plans. This rigidity damages your spirit. You begin to feel like a victim of circumstance, completely forgetting that your original plan was nothing more than a best guess. Flexibility is the art of updating your map in real time. It requires the quiet confidence to accept that the path you imagined is not the only route to your destination. When the road closes, the strategist immediately looks for a detour. Reclaim your agency by accepting the terrain as it is, not as you wished it to be. A change in direction is not a delay, it is the only way forward. There is a silent suffering in feeling trapped between giving up and burning out. Society rarely teaches us the crucial space between these two extremes. We are conditioned to view any deviation from the original plan as an absolute surrender. This black and white thinking creates a psychological prison where you're forced to choose between feeling like a coward or living like a martyr. Let us define reality. Quitting is turning your back on your ultimate destination because the journey became difficult. Quitting destroys your self-respect. Pivoting, however, is realizing the north face of the mountain is too dangerous and intelligently choosing the eastern trail. Many brilliant individuals remain stuck in mediocrity because their ego refuses to let them pivot. They mistake a change in tactics for a defeat in life. You must learn to ruthlessly abandon methods that do not serve you while remaining fiercely loyal to your ultimate vision. Discarding a broken tool is an act of high intelligence, not a symptom of weakness. Give yourself permission to adapt. When you separate your self-worth from the specific how, you become incredibly dangerous, because you can no longer be stopped by a simple roadblock. Time is the only resource you can never earn back. Yet, we hemorrhage our time daily on strategies that yield zero return. This is the hidden mechanism of stubbornness. It feels like hard work, so we convince ourselves it is productive. But motion does not equal progress. Grinding away at a dead-end approach is a comforting illusion that protects you from the discomfort of trying something new. Every minute you spend punching a concrete wall is a minute you steal from building a ladder to climb over it. The opportunity cost is staggering. While you're locked in a futile battle of attrition, massive opportunities are passing you by unnoticed. Your mental bandwidth is entirely consumed by frustration, leaving you blind to the open doors standing just a few feet to your left. Strategic flexibility allows you to deploy your resources with deadly precision. It requires the maturity to look at your efforts objectively and cut your losses. Sometimes, taking one step backward gives you the momentum needed to leap over the obstacle entirely. Stop letting stubbornness bankrupt your energy. Protect your time fiercely and invest it only in angles of attack that actually move the needle. The heaviest weight you carry is not the difficulty of your goal, but the demands of your ego. We refuse to change course because admitting our initial plan was flawed feels like a personal humiliation. You silently bleed energy trying to prove you can force a square peg into a round hole. This need to be right overrides the desire to actually win, trapping you in a cycle of endless, pointless friction. Ask yourself who you're trying to impress with this unnecessary suffering. The truth is, nobody cares about the specific mechanics of your journey, they only respect the final result. When your ego chains you to a failing method, you sabotage your own success out of pure, unadulterated pride. You become your own worst enemy, choosing the illusion of correctness over the reality of achievement. True mastery requires a brutal dismantling of pride. Flexibility is born from deep humility. It is the quiet strength to look at a failure and say, "This is not working, I will find another way." Liberate yourself from the suffocating need to be perfect on the first try. Shift your focus entirely toward the objective. A man who prioritizes results over his ego is a man who cannot be defeated. The modern world conditions you to fixate solely on the finish line. You're told that happiness and fulfillment only exist at the end of the struggle. This outcome dependence makes the journey feel like a brutal, unbearable chore. When you hate the climb, every single rock in your path feels like a tragedy, an unfair punishment designed to break your spirit and force your surrender. If you only care about the trophy, an unexpected detour will shatter your motivation. The pain becomes too much because the reward feels too far away. This is why so many quit just before a breakthrough. They lack the fuel to sustain them through the chaotic, messy reality of execution. When the process is nothing but suffering, your mind will eventually find a rational excuse to stop walking. Shift your identity from a goal chaser to a problem solver. When you actually enjoy the mechanics of what you do, an obstacle is no longer a reason to quit. It becomes a fascinating new puzzle to solve. This deep engagement with the work gives you infinite stamina. You become completely adaptable because you're not desperate for a shortcut. The man who loves the walk will always outlast the man who only loves the destination. We have forgotten how to observe the natural order. We build our mindsets like skyscrapers of concrete and glass, rigid, unyielding, and destined to crack under extreme pressure. We view flexibility as a compromise of our integrity. Yet, the most enduring forces on this planet do not operate through sheer resistance. True endurance requires a different, more sophisticated kind of strength entirely. Look at the river. When water meets a massive boulder, it does not stop to argue. It does not waste energy trying to pulverize the stone. It simply finds the path of least resistance, flowing around the obstacle while maintaining its relentless momentum toward the ocean. In contrast, when we hit a barrier, our rigidity causes us to crash, shatter, and lose all forward motion. Emulate the fluid intelligence of nature. Be like the bamboo that bends completely flat under a hurricane, only to snap back to its full height when the storm passes. Stop trying to be the immovable rock that eventually crumbles. True power lies in your capacity to adapt your shape to the situation, while keeping your core purpose intact. Become water, and you will inevitably carve your way to the top. There's a paralyzing fear of failure that quietly dictates every move you make. Society has hardwired you to view a dead end as a final judgment on your character. When a strategy collapses, you internalize it as a deep personal flaw. This emotional interpretation of events blinds you to the actual reality of the situation, replacing objective analysis with toxic shame and self-doubt. When you view a mistake as a tragedy, your instinct is to hide, deny, or blindly push harder just to prove you're not a failure. You waste critical mental energy mourning a tactic that was never meant to work. This emotional reaction prevents you from extracting the one thing that actually matters. The lesson: a man blinded by his own frustration will miss the exact clue he needs to win. Strip the emotion out of the equation. A failed attempt is not a reflection of your worth. It is simply raw, unfiltered data. You just successfully discovered one way that does not work. That is an advantage. The strategist takes out his notebook, crosses off that route, and calmly moves to the next option. Stop punishing yourself for collecting necessary information. Use the data to calibrate your next strike. We often trap ourselves in highly specific, rigid fantasies of exactly how our success must look. You paint a singular, detailed picture in your mind, and if reality deviates by even a fraction, you feel profound disappointment. This hyperfixation narrows your vision so drastically that you become completely blind to alternative, often superior, opportunities that present themselves along the way. By obsessing over the precise coordinates of your destination, you miss the fertile valleys you pass through. Many men achieve exactly what they planned, only to realize they sacrificed everything for a hollow victory. Or worse, they abandoned the journey entirely because the specific path they demanded became impossible, ignoring a dozen other routes that would have led to an even greater triumph. Treat your ultimate ambition not as a strict blueprint, but as a North Star. It provides a general direction, a guiding light to keep you moving forward in the dark. But you do not need to walk in a perfectly straight line to honor it. Allow yourself the freedom to explore the terrain. Trust that as long as you're moving toward the light, the specific path you take will forge exactly who you need to become. Adaptability is not an inherent genetic trait reserved for a lucky few. It is a mechanical muscle that must be broken down and built up. You cannot expect to possess massive strategic flexibility in a crisis if you remain dangerously rigid in your normal life. The modern man avoids small inconveniences, creating a fragile nervous system that shatters the moment real adversity appears on the horizon. Notice how you react to minor disruptions. When traffic blocks your usual route, or your planned schedule falls apart, do you quietly seethe with anger? This low-level frustration is the exact same mechanism that destroys your grand ambitions. If you cannot handle a change in your dinner plans without losing your emotional center, you will never possess the composure required to navigate a true life crisis. Start training your mind with micro-flexibility. Purposefully invite small disruptions and practice navigating them with absolute cold calmness. When a minor plan fails, instantly pivot without a single word of complaint. By mastering the art of adapting to the trivial, you forge an unbreakable mindset. When the real storms hit, you will not panic. You will simply adjust your sails and continue your dominance. You are trapped by the ghost of yesterday. The concept of sunk cost is the psychological anchor drowning modern men. You believe that because you have invested years into a specific career, relationship, or strategy, you must see it through to the bitter end. This logic is a devastating mathematical error. You are valuing the time you have already lost over the time you still have left to live. This fallacy chains you to misery. You watch men slowly die inside, working jobs they hate or fighting battles they have already lost, simply because they refuse to admit the initial investment was a mistake. They bleed their future dry to pay for the errors of their past. The emotional toll is absolute exhaustion, a life lived entirely in defense of a failing premise rather than in pursuit of a real victory. The past is dead, and it cannot be refunded. Your only asset is the present moment and the energy you hold right now. A master tactician cuts his losses with cold, ruthless precision. Acknowledge the time spent, extract the lesson, and immediately redirect your remaining resources toward a strategy that actually yields results. Walking away from a bad investment is the first step toward actual freedom. A pivot is never an act of panic. It is a calculated strike. Most people confuse flexibility with chaos. They hit a wall, get emotional, and blindly jump into a completely different direction with zero planning. That is not strategic adaptability, that is just running away. True flexibility requires a disciplined mind that can analyze a failure without letting emotion hijack the decision-making process. When you abandon a method out of sheer frustration, you carry that chaotic energy into your next endeavor. You become a drifter, constantly starting over but never building anything of substance. This erratic movement creates a deep sense of instability. You lose the trust of those around you, and worse, you lose trust in yourself, because your actions are dictated by temporary pain rather than long-term vision. Build the architecture of your next move in absolute silence. When a path closes, step back and evaluate the board. Determine exactly what assets you have left, what leverage you can create, and what new angle will bypass the obstacle. A successful pivot is a deliberate shift in force, maintaining your momentum while altering your trajectory. Move with purpose, not with panic. Your rigidity is often a performance for an audience that does not care about you. We stick to failing plans because we are terrified of looking inconsistent to our peers, our families, or society at large. You have constructed an image of the resilient man who never backs down, and now you are a prisoner to that exact persona. You are sacrificing your actual success to protect a fictional reputation. The crowd demands a simple narrative. They want to see you walk a straight line, and when you alter your course, they will judge you. They will call you flaky, lost, or defeated. If you allow their whispers to dictate your strategy, you will march straight off a cliff just to prove you're not afraid of heights. This external validation is a poison that slowly kills your strategic intuition. Emancipate yourself from the opinions of the spectators. The men who actually move the world do not ask the crowd for permission to change their minds. They are fiercely loyal to their mission and entirely indifferent to the temporary judgments of those watching from the sidelines. Have the courage to disappoint their expectations. Your duty is to win the war, not to entertain the gallery. Nothing is ever a total loss unless you walk away empty-handed. When a strategy collapses, the amateur burns the entire operation to the ground in a fit of rage. The strategist walks through the ashes and salvages every usable piece of iron. Every failed business, broken relationship, or rejected project contains immense value, provided you have the emotional control to harvest it. Walking away from a failure with nothing but bitterness guarantees you will repeat the exact same mistake. You convince yourself the entire experience was a waste of time, which damages your self-esteem and makes you hesitant to take future risks. This scorched earth mentality blinds you to the skills you acquired, the resilience you built, and the vital intelligence you gathered during the struggle. Extract the payload from your failures. You may have lost the battle, but you kept the discipline. You expanded your network, and you learned precisely what a trap looks like. Carry these refined assets into your next operation. When you realize that every defeat actually arms you with better weapons for the next fight, the fear of failure completely evaporates. You become a machine that feeds on friction. Hustle culture has demonized the concept of stepping back. You're told that if you're not constantly grinding forward, you're falling behind. This relentless pressure forces you to keep swinging your sword even when your vision is blurred and your muscles are tearing. You confuse frantic motion with effective action, denying your mind the space it needs to actually formulate a winning strategy. Constant pivoting without clarity is just exhaustion disguised as adaptability. When you're chronically fatigued, your cognitive function plummets. You cannot see the alternative routes because your brain is operating in basic survival mode. This leads to a tragic cycle of hitting a wall, frantically trying a slightly different spot on the same wall and breaking yourself down to nothing. Weaponize your rest. Stepping off the battlefield to recalibrate is an offensive maneuver. It is the deliberate act of clearing the noise so you can see the entire map again. Allow yourself the silence required to process the data you have collected. A man who knows how to strategically pause will always outmaneuver the man who is blindly running himself into the ground. Resilience is no longer enough. Resilience simply means you can take a punch and return to your baseline shape. You survive the damage, but you do not improve from it. The modern world requires something deeper. It requires you to become a system that actually gains strength from disorder, chaos, and shock. You must evolve from being merely robust to becoming undeniably anti-fragile. The rigid man shatters under pressure. The resilient man endures the pressure but remains unchanged. If your only goal is to survive the storm, you will spend your entire life hiding in the bunker. You will view every unexpected obstacle as a threat to your stability, creating a permanent state of low-level anxiety. You will avoid the very challenges that are necessary to forge your ultimate potential. Program your mind to feed on difficulty. When the plan falls apart, do not just endure it, use the chaos to expose your weaknesses and rebuild them stronger. Welcome the unexpected detour because it forces you to develop new navigational skills. When you structure your identity to benefit from disruption, the universe can no longer threaten you. Every obstacle simply becomes resistance training for your mind. The loudest men in the room are almost always the most rigid. Their outward display of unyielding dominance is a mask for deep internal insecurity. They must constantly announce their strength because they secretly fear a situation they cannot control. They bark orders and force situations to bend to their will, relying entirely on intimidation rather than actual intelligence or tactical supremacy. This noisy, aggressive posture drains massive amounts of energy. When a rigid man encounters an obstacle he cannot bully into submission, he breaks down completely. His entire identity is tied to forcing the world to comply. When the world refuses, he is left with nothing but empty rage. His stubbornness is not a sign of power. It is a desperate mechanism to hide his inability to adapt. True confidence is entirely silent. It is the calm demeanor of a man who knows he can adjust to absolutely any variable thrown his way. He does not need to force the door open. He simply finds the key or locates a window. This quiet power commands massive respect. When you trust your ability to navigate the unknown, you no longer need to shout. Your execution speaks loud enough. You are being crushed by an arbitrary clock. Society hands you a strict timeline for when you must achieve your financial, personal, and physical goals. You internalize these deadlines and turn them into a whip to punish yourself. When a strategy takes longer than expected, or a detour is required, you panic, believing that you are permanently falling behind some invisible schedule of success. This chronological anxiety forces you to rush the process. You take dangerous shortcuts, ignore critical details, and force outcomes before they are ready. You sacrifice the quality of your work just to meet a deadline that nobody actually cares about. This desperation strips the joy from your daily efforts, replacing the steady rhythm of mastery with the frantic heartbeat of a man running out of time. Release the timeline. True legacy is built on precision, not speed. The mountain does not care how fast you climb it, it only demands that you respect the terrain. A strategic detour may add months to your journey, but it ensures you arrive alive and victorious. Focus purely on the excellence of your execution in this exact moment. Time will eventually submit to a man who refuses to be rushed. There is a supreme state of existence that exists beyond struggle. It is the realization that you no longer have to fight the current to reach your destination. When you finally release your death grip on how things are supposed to be, a profound mental weight is lifted. You stop viewing life as an endless war of attrition and begin to recognize it as a vast dynamic system of energy to be navigated. The friction that used to consume your days begins to disappear. The unexpected emergencies that once ruined your week are now calmly processed as mere variables in an equation. You no longer suffer the intense emotional crashes that accompany failed expectations, because you have stopped demanding the world to be predictable. You move through your days with a smooth, frictionless grace. This is the ultimate freedom of fluidity. You maintain a spirit of absolute unbreakability, not because you are hard, but because you are formless. You pour yourself into whatever container the moment requires, execute the necessary action, and move on without attachment. You have achieved a level of psychological mastery where external circumstances can no longer dictate your internal peace. We arrive at the final synthesis. You are no longer the man who gives up at the first sign of trouble, nor are you the fool who beats his head against a brick wall until he dies. You have merged the raw power of persistence with the sharp intelligence of strategic flexibility. You have become an entity that is entirely committed to the destination, yet beautifully unattached to the vehicle that takes you there. The men who lack this balance will always look at you with confusion. They will not understand how you can take so many hits without losing momentum. They will be baffled by your ability to abandon a failing project on Monday and launch a winning strike on Tuesday. They are still playing checkers with brute force while you're playing a fluid, multidimensional game of pure strategy. You are now an unstoppable force in the modern world. You cannot be trapped because you will simply change shape and slip through the bars. You cannot be defeated because every loss is immediately converted into tactical data. You hold your vision in your mind like a fortress, and you treat your methods like disposable tools. Walk forward with this quiet dominance. The path is yours to command. The lie of blind persistence has broken enough good men. You now possess the intelligence to recognize when a wall is meant to be climbed and when a wall is meant to be bypassed. You understand that real power is not about suffering the most, it is about adapting the fastest. Never let anyone shame you for pivoting your strategy. Your loyalty belongs to your ultimate potential, not to a broken method. You are building an empire, and an architect does not cry over a discarded blueprint, he simply draws a better one. Do not confuse this flexibility with weakness. It is the most sophisticated form of dominance you can achieve. Keep your eyes locked on the horizon, but let your feet dance with the terrain. If this shift in perspective gave you the clarity you needed to stop fighting a useless battle, subscribe to the channel. We are building a community of men who win through intelligence, not just endurance. Drop your old methods, keep your ultimate goal. Now, get back to work.